We want to just take a bit of time to share with you what God has done in Ben, our son's life. And some of you listening to this will think, well, I didn't know this. I didn't know this went on. And I suppose we'd just say at the beginning that I suppose we didn't share with many people some of the struggles that we've been through with Ben, and there were several reasons for that, but I guess one was we were protecting him, we were kind of protecting ourselves, we weren't quite sure what to make of it, so yeah, just to put that into picture, but we just hope this will really bless you and encourage you. So I'll just begin by saying that when Ben, our son, was born in 2011, he was an incredibly placid baby. He was a very easygoing child. At 7 weeks, he started sleeping through 12 hours through the night. He of course, he had his moments, but he was just a very jolly little boy. He laughed about a lot of things.
Yeah, and then so what happened when he was about 3 is that we started to notice a change in his behaviour, and this was certainly noticeable to us. That he started becoming more unpredictable, erratic in his behaviour, started to display more aggression, and overreacted to things. So things that would have previously kind of just washed over him, things that would seem to us quite small things, he would kind of overreact and kind of fly off the handle, and particularly became sensitive to changes in his situation, into our family circumstances, into things going on around us. He become very sensitive to change, and I guess that's, like Sarah said a minute ago, one reason perhaps that a lot of you that may watch this and have known us and Ben over the years may not recognise what we're talking about is that a lot of his behaviour was most noticeable when we went away as a family, when we went to visit relatives, or when we went on vacations. Those kind of changes in situation and in his routine kind of flagged up and kind of sparked this kind of challenging behaviour more than, and also a lot of it was kind of reserved for when we were as a family together at home. Kind of some of his behaviour would become most apparent then as well. At the peak of it, his behaviour got to the point when he was kind of 5 or 6 that he almost had depressive thoughts, depressive tendencies, and even suicidal kind of expressions. So he, in a few occasions, Sarah actually had to kind of rescue him off his windowsill in his first floor bedroom, because he was expressing the desire to kind of want to jump out of his window, and so this was really upsetting for us, as you can imagine, really challenging this behaviour that we were dealing with over the period of when he was 3 through to 7, and so yeah, this was really upsetting time for us. One of the kind of quirks he developed at this time was spinning. So he would just start spinning, particularly to music, and he would just keep spinning and spinning and spinning. And this was a kind of quirk alongside some of the more challenging behaviour. This was something, and he still does it, and he can spin for hours. Well, not hours, but he can spin for a very long. He could keep going. He just kind of gets bored, but he could just spin and spin without getting dizzy. So that was kind of one of the quirks to this behaviour as well. And then Sarah's going to share sleep was an issue.
Yeah, he didn't sleep. He really just couldn't switch off, and it was just very, very common that we would come to go to bed, he'd still be awake, and he rarely, and in all honesty, he rarely got more sleep than we did. We would go to bed, he'd still be awake, and he'd wake up before us. And for a child of his age, from 3, 4, he should have been having more like 12 hours. He never slept in the day. He just couldn't switch off. And all this behaviour for us was just amounting, and it was getting worse. And we kind of knew something wasn't right. This wasn't just a little boy who was growing up. It was more than that, and we were increasingly struggling with it, weren't we? Not coping with this behaviour and the lack of sleep that he and us were having.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, it's worth saying at this point that amongst all these challenges that we were experiencing with Ben, which some of you will recognise. There was great times of joy as a family as well, and Ben's an amazing guy, and we have great times with him. So we're kind of painting this bleak picture, but we were just trying to express some of the challenges that we had as a family, and that Ben, some of the struggles that Ben had, and some of the kind of the challenges we experienced as parents. But there were great times. We saw Ben grow and develop, and grow in his faith as well. He's got a kind of real sincere faith of his own, which is amazing. He loves reading his action Bible, loves his Legos, things like this. And as those of you who know us will know that our faith in Jesus is a massive part of our lives. And so at this time, as we were going through these challenges, we were praying, and we were kind of crying out to God, and we asked for prayer for Ben from others as well, particularly his godparents. Shout out to them.
We called on you a lot.
They prayed a lot at this time.
Yeah.
And then we were kind of questioning what's going on, really, in our hearts. Why has Ben changed like this? We'd seen this change in his behaviour. What's caused this to happen? And we kind of questioning, surely this isn't God's plan and purpose for Ben's life. It became, really, this behaviour became worse as time went on. And as I said earlier, particularly became apparent when we went to visit family away from home, and Sarah's family lived kind of in other parts of the country. So when we went to visit them, they noticed the challenges we experienced with Ben's behaviour and the struggles that he was having, particularly in comparison to some of his male cousins who are a very similar age to him. They could see how Ben was reacting to things compared to them, and it was very noticeable to them. And some of Sarah's family are also professional school teachers, and so they were picking up on some of Ben's behaviour and starting to say, oh, he's showing autistic tendencies. A lot of this behaviour just is right in line with autism, and so that was a real kind of challenge, struggle for us, hearing that kind of diagnosis, if you like. So.
And I remember some of my relatives just saying, you really need to see someone professionally about Ben, you really need to do something about this. But for us, we kind of, as Andy said, we were pressing into God. We're like, no, this isn't it. We don't want to go down that route. So we were kind of, you could say we were in denial, but we were also, our eyes were fully open to what God could do as well. And so we were, one week in early March, this is 2019, so kind of just over a year ago, I was praying about Ben, and God gave me a picture. And this picture was of this digger. In fact, I actually saw this digger, and it was like this big arm on a digger raised up with a big bucket on top. And I saw this digger head, and I felt God saying, and I looked at it, I thought, that looks really ugly. And God said, I felt God saying that it's going to rear its ugly head. And I was like, what's going to rear its ugly head? And I felt God saying that I'm going to show you what is causing this to Ben. And that was one of our questions. What's causing it? Why has he changed so much? And so I saw this picture of this digger. And I felt God saying, I'm going to show you what's causing it so that you know how to pray. And then the second part of the picture was I saw this tiny little seedling growing up, this new shoot, this healthy, strong new shoot. And I felt God saying, and there's going to be a new shoot of hope. And so that was a great encouragement. Then a couple of days after that, I was praying and fasting for the day, just meditating more on that. And I happened to be reading a book. And I was just reading in this book, and the chapter I read just jumped out at me. And I'm just going to read you a little excerpt from the book that I read. And this, just bear in mind, was totally new to me. I'd never heard anything like this before. It said in the book, that an epidemic of juvenile autism and other neurological and developmental disorders are sweeping through America's school-aged children, and they generally coincide with the introduction of certain mandatory immunizations. A growing body of scientific and medical research appears to link this dangerous health trend to these childhood immunizations. And then the book goes on to talk specifically about the vaccination measles, mumps and rubella, which is combined vaccination, that Ben was given, I think when he was about 3, and he had a series of those vaccinations. And it said that there's a strong link, there's a growing link between that vaccination and then children developing problems with their brains, autistic type problems. And I read this, I'd never heard anything like this before. I now know that there is quite a bit of information about this, but at the time I was like, what? I've never heard this before. And it jumped out at me, and it was suddenly as though, it was like, that's it. That's why Ben has changed so much. And for me, it really led me to a bit of repentance, because I realised that when I'd taken the children to the doctors and gone through their routine immunisations, I never once stopped and said, God, is this what you want? Is this right? I just was like, yes, doctors, whatever you say. They were my God, okay? That they were more important to me than the voice of God. Now, I would just say at this point, I'm not saying that all immunisations are bad for you and you shouldn't have them. But in this moment and in this time, this is what God was revealing to me.
Yeah, and also at this time, we started watching an online Bible teaching that we found on YouTube entitled The Believer's Authority, Bible teaching by Andrew Womack. And we're here now at Caris Bible College, which Andrew Womack built. And this teaching actually started to challenge and kind of inform our prayers, and also challenge our thinking in terms of how we dealt with some of the challenges and struggles we were facing. And you know, the great thing about this teaching, The Believer's Authority, is just how kind of beautifully simple it is, and how it kind of brings alive and applies some of the scriptures, some of the Bible verses that we've kind of known for years, but really sort of brought it home to us in a new way. And basically that, you know, when God made the earth and God made mankind, he gave authority to man over his creation. He gave that authority to man, and then mankind, we've chosen to turn away from God, reject God, and believe the lies of the enemy. And in doing so, we've given that authority away. We've kind of turned that authority over to the devil, to Satan. And that's why Jesus in John chapter 8 actually says the devil is the ruler of this world. And but then Jesus came as God in the flesh. And when Jesus came and he on the cross, he took all our bad choices, all our wrong decisions. And then when he rose victorious from the grave, he actually won that authority back. He actually bought that authority back, took it back off the devil. And then as believers, those of us who believe in Jesus, we're then delegated that authority back from Jesus. When he says, go, in my name you have authority, and as his body on this earth, he then gives that authority back to us. And that's what we were kind of learning, how this all fits together in the scripture. And so that was then starting to really transform the way we were praying.
And so rather than begging God to heal our son Ben, suddenly I was like, I don't have to beg God, he's already done it. And I can just take my authority over my son. And now for the first time I had an understanding of what was going on in Ben's brain from this book I'd been reading about. And so before picking up the children from school that day, I decided I'm going to go for a walk and I'm just going to pray. And I prayed in the Spirit, I prayed in tongues, and rather than going, God, please heal Ben, I just took authority over his brain. I said, brain be healed. I spoke healing over his brain. And I really believed it. I was like, I have authority, I'm not just begging God. And then I went straight from walking just to go and pick up the children and from the school. And just one thing I'll just insert here about Ben is, although we had all these challenges with Ben with his behaviour, what we never really had a challenge with was his physical health. Ben has always been an incredibly healthy child. He never got sick, he never had a cold, he was just a very, very well child, wasn't he, which was a real blessing. So what happened next got my attention. I picked him up from school and we got home. We only lived kind of a 2-minute walk from the school gates. And he said, Mummy, I don't feel right. And I touched him. I realised immediately he had a temperature, he had a fever, he was hot, he was burning up. And he wasn't kind of crying like, I feel so ill, but he was just had a fever. He didn't want to eat, he just wanted to sleep. And I was like, well, this got my attention. And you know, immediately I knew this had something to do with what I just prayed. I was like, I don't understand it, but I like, this isn't a coincidence. My son Ben never gets ill. This is no coincidence.
Oh, and is it worth saying that you actually checked with the school?
Oh, yes,
and
yeah.
No other children in the school
Yes.
had any symptoms
Yes.
of a fever, of anything.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
So-
Yes. The next week I went and
Yeah.
said, by any chance, did anyone in the school, his class, have fever? And no, no one has. Anyway, so I knew this got my attention, and I kind of said to God, "What's going on? What's happening?" And God just said to me that that you need to see something, Sarah, to believe what I'm going to do and how I'm going to heal him. So I was like, okay. Yeah, do you want to say what? Yeah, so the next thing was a friend of ours. So whilst this fever was it lasted probably a couple of days. In the midst of the fever, one evening we were sat down, and a friend just sent me a link. A Christian friend just sent me a link to a doctor that was talking about various different issues. So I was like, oh, okay, I'll just listen to this. And what this doctor said just hit us, didn't it? Unbelievable. So I'll let you explain.
Yeah, so I'm going to try and summarise from this interview that we saw with this guy called Dr. John Gray, who some of you may know is he's the author of Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. So he's a physician and a psychiatrist, and this interview with him just really, as Sarah said, grabbed our attention. And basically what he was saying, trying to sum it up, is that a fever is our natural, our body's natural mechanism to protect the brain and fight against toxins that come into our bloodstream. And this can include, he did actually specify, this can include toxins as a result of a vaccination. And he then also talked about the impact of paracetamol. And back home in the UK, it's very common for you to be advised to give children paracetamol when they have a fever, after vaccinations as well. And what I'm going to quote Dr. John Gray here, says, if we take paracetamol to suppress the fever, then our brains are not protected, and this causes oxidative stress, and inflammation builds around the brain and is unable to protect itself. These result in a chronic condition, autism and related dysfunctions, and you derail the normal development of the brain. So this just really kind of shook us to the core, really, as we heard this. And he interestingly, in his research, he quotes medical and scientific research as part of this interview that we listened to, and also that in some countries they don't actually allow paracetamol to be given to young children after vaccinations. And his research shows, another research here he was quoting, that the levels of autism in these countries where they don't give paracetamol to children in post-vaccination, the autism levels are really low. So this was incredible to us, and he also then says to restore the normal development of the brain, you need to induce a fever. And he also went on to say in this interview that this oxidative stress can cause very difficult sleeping patterns, which we had obviously experienced with Ben. So all this was starting to really speak to us. He then went on to, so let this vehicle go past. So yeah, the sleeping patterns we'd experienced, which he directly quoted. He then went on to talk about the treatment that he had been practicing, and basically what he was doing, he was using a natural mineral spas, so hot water and mineral spas, mineral water, to treat children who are suffering with autism and autistic traits. And basically he was mimicking the fever, and inducing a fever through this natural mineral spa treatment. And he saw over a program of several weeks with children he was working with that basically autism in these children was completely reversed through this treatment. And so this just amazed us, didn't it?
Oh, I was stunned. I just sat there and I just started crying. Just that kind of like, oh my goodness, autism can be. This man has found that autism can be cured for inducing a fever on the brain, and what was happening to our son at that very moment, he had a fever. And it was just like, wow, God, in accordance with our belief, he was healing our son. Now, we now know that when Jesus died on the cross, healing was dealt with, sickness was dealt with. By his stripes, we are healed. But God is so gracious, and he was healing Ben in accordance with what we would believe, and he knew that we needed to see something happen, and so by seeing this fever, it was helping us believe. And God, he could have been healed instantly, but this he was doing it in line with what we could believe. And so over the next kind of day or so, his fever subsided, and what we had was our Ben back. It was just amazing. This incredible, happy, placid, joyful child. It was just, and for me, it was like, this was the child I gave birth to. This is our Ben. This is the boy I remember as a toddler, and it was amazing. And I remember on the Saturday, I took him and Esther to our local town, and I realised how tense I'd become with Ben. Taking him anywhere, I was tense because his behaviour was so unpredictable and could be so aggressive, and it was like tension dropped off me because he was so happy, and I was like, oh, thank you, Jesus. And and we just started thinking, he's healed. And then Sunday morning came, and as was often the case, Andy and I were involved in our church service that morning and helping lead. And it was then as though, the best way to describe it was as though all hell broke loose in our house with Ben. And it was like, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 out of 10 was the scale of his behaviour that morning. Suddenly he went berserk. And I remember having to take Esther and I out of the room because he was throwing chairs, he was aggressive, it was horrendous. And I just remember turning to Andy and just going, we thought it was healed, what's going on? And at that moment you just said to me, don't forget, we are in a battle here. And for me, that watered that little seedling I described at the beginning, a seedling of hope. I was like, yes, we're in a battle, and we're going to battle this, and we're going to see the victory in his life. And I'll pass it on to you.
Yeah, so Ephesians 6, we war not against flesh and blood, but we're in a spiritual battle, and that's kind of what we were facing. And we saw over that next week other kind of kickbacks, none as bad as that Sunday morning, but there are other kickbacks in Ben's behaviour. But what happened is that our faith was starting to grow, and we were starting to believe that Ben was healed, that God had healed him, and so we started to declare that. We started to speak that over Ben as a family, and as that week progressed, we saw a complete just cessation of those behavioural challenges and those kind of autistic traits that Ben had been showing, and we saw that stop. And one of the real kind of clear changes in him was just a joy. He started laughing at stuff, things that would have previously sparked a kind of an irrational, perhaps aggressive episode in him. He was just able to laugh them off, and that was just amazing. This kind of joy. Another truck going past. this joy came up, and that was it was freedom for him and freedom for us as we saw this change in his behaviour back to his kind of his joyful, happy self. And one of the first real tests for us came just a few weeks later. Over Easter, we went to stay with Sarah's parents, a 3-hour drive away up in Norfolk, England, and often these times would have really been challenging, and in the few years preceding, we would have been kind of dreading these times in a sense, in relation to perhaps how Ben's behaviour could have turned out. But this Easter up at Sarah's parents, and we didn't say anything to them initially, but they recognised without us saying anything, something they saw, and they said to us, "Wow, Ben's changed his behaviour," and so they recognised it, and that was that just sealed in our hearts, in Ben's healing, and we were able to say, this is done, deal is done.
And then several months later, we embarked on the biggest change that our family had ever had to that point, and we moved here to Colorado and to come to Bible college here. And I remember a relative saying earlier in the year when we were kind of talking about moving here, he just saying to me, "How can you move Ben there? He doesn't cope with even going a few hours down the road. The difference, how's he ever going to cope with moving to a different country? Everything will be different." And this is the testament to our healer and to the healing that's taken place with Ben. He didn't just cope, he's been victorious, and he is healed. And he went to a new school, he had new friends, he had a new home, everything was different. And he's healed.
Yeah.
It's just,
Yeah.
we're just, so we just celebrate what happened in Ben. But what I just want to say at this point, and this may seem like a downer, but I speak this really to people that are going through their own healing journey. So what happened March just gone, everyone knows that the pandemic of fear hit the world, and lockdown affected us as it did everyone around the world. And what happened this was exactly a year, so this was March, and it was March the previous year that we'd seen healing in Ben. What began to happen is we started to see some of this behaviour start to rear its ugly head again. Not constantly, but just every now and then, wasn't it? And we thought, what is going on here? But this time, we knew he was healed. Now, in the Bible, it says that the devil is like a thief. He comes to kill, steal, and destroy. And we knew enough about God, and we knew enough about the devil to know this isn't from God. God has healed our son. So instead of us going, oh no, he hasn't been healed, we just said, you are healed, Ben. We spoke over to him, and we just proclaimed in victory that he was healed, rather than being, And honestly, we battled that for a few months, didn't we? But we never gave in. We were like, no, we just kept on speaking over him. You are healed. And I say this to anyone that is struggling with healing at the moment. You might think, oh, I thought I was healed, but now my knee hurts again. That's the enemy. He wants to steal that healing from you. And I just encourage you, like we did, just keep proclaiming, keep declaring, I am healed. Because of Jesus, I am healed. By his stripes, I am healed. I was healed. Jesus took it all at the cross. And so that leads us to today. And as I said at the beginning, many of you will listen to this who know us well and go, we never knew you went through all this. We never knew that Ben's behaviour got to the point that you weren't coping. But it was just this last couple of weeks, God said to me, it's time you shared the story. And there's this beautiful verse in Revelation, and I'm going to read it to you, and it says, it talks about the devil. The devil is our accuser. And it says, the accuser of our brothers and sisters, that's us, that's Ben, has been thrown down to earth. And the one who accuses them before our God day and night has been thrown down. And then it says, this is how we defeat our accuser. We defeat him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of our testimony. That's how we defeat our accuser. And so that's what we're doing now. We're just sharing the testimony. We're sharing what God has done in Ben's life and in our lives.
Yeah, so we hope this has encouraged you, it's kind of spurred you on, maybe it's provoked some questions as well, and we just if you want to get in touch with us about what we've been sharing, to kind of ask us questions, ask for clarification, then do get in touch with us, we just really hope this has been a blessing.